So welcome to Hometown Heroes. Ketchikan is not lacking for interesting and amazing people. We all know that. And we have found yet another interesting and amazing person right here on our little island. Mike Harpold wrote a brand new book, and it is called Jumping the Line. And you have such an amazing history in the subject matter of this book. Not only that, but the story about how you wrote this book, what you went through to write this book, is really kind of tantalizing. So tell me first what you did before you came to Ketchikan, because I think that's a big piece of what this book is all about.
I was in the Immigration and Naturalization Service, and at the time in 1984, my wife Elaine and I had just married. She was living in New Orleans, and I was living in San Francisco and not liking the commute very well. And we were debating on a place where we could get together.
Okay. And you ended up where?
We ended up in Ketchikan, Alaska.
Really?
We thought for maybe a 1 or 2 year honeymoon, but we had a family. And we've raised 2 daughters here, and we found it a perfect place to raise children.
Fascinating. Now, you've had some interesting experiences, and you also, it was interesting when I heard you speak, that there's some things that have gone on in the Border Patrol immigration area. A lot of it's changed, but a lot of it's rather nonsensical. Give me a little glimpse into that.
Well, the thing that hasn't changed is this push for cheap labor in the United States. And that has been the underlying motivation, the underlying theme for the last 50, 60 years. And that's why our borders are out of control today. There was a time when we had control of our borders, and that was in the early 60s.
Really?
That was about the time that I started in the U.S. Border Patrol. That was 1962 in Calexico, California. And the border was very quiet. There were only 1,400 of us. We were able to patrol alone in a Jeep with nothing but a 6-shooter. You know, no problem. Sometimes you wouldn't see a person for out there in the desert for a month.
Really? So how many people back then, say, were attempting to cross the border? And why were they doing it? Was it for jobs?
It was for jobs, of course. But back then we had what was called the Bracero program, which was a Mexican temporary agricultural worker program, where farmers were allowed to contract for Mexican workers to come in for a limited period of time and harvest crops and return to Mexico.
So they did that just every year regularly?
Every year regularly. There were about 450,000 that came in every year.
Wow.
And it was good for enforcement, because if we went on to a farmer's fields or in his vineyards and found even one illegal alien, we left with his whole crew. We took the Braceros, we took the illegal immigrant Braceros, we took back to a camp, and they could be contracted to another farmer.
Really?
But that farmer lost his help on the spot. The bottom line was,
everyone followed the rules.
No way he was going to hire an illegal immigrant. So, you know, the Mexicans, knowing that they couldn't get jobs, you know, didn't come. And in 1964, the last year of the Bracero program, we apprehended 44,000 illegal immigrants. Today, we're apprehending over 1 million.
What changed?
Well, the Bracero program ended. It ended in 1964. The bad thing about the Bracero program is it competed unfairly with American farm workers, and there were not only Mexican-American farm workers, but there were black and white and Filipino farm workers. And of course, they couldn't make any more money than what a farmer would be willing to pay to Braceros. The Bracero wage was set by law.
Okay. And what was that wage, just out of curiosity, do you know?
It was 70 cents an hour in Texas, 90 cents an hour in Arizona, and $1.10 an hour in California.
Okay.
And that sort of set the wage on things. And the domestic farm workers in order to make, in 1965, a median income of about $3,000. A Mexican-American family or a white family or a black family had to move 8 times during the course of a crop year.
Wow.
And so Cesar Chavez, of course, was one of the movers and shakers, along with a whole coalition of church, community, labor, to end the Bracero programs. And when that ended, Chavez began organizing. And he won, and was able to win over a period of years through strikes, boycotts and fasts, contracts. And as a result of that, wages rose. Field sanitation became a fact. And hire back clauses, as part of the contract, he would get in there provisions permitting the hire back of this year's workers for next year's crop. Well, that took an awful lot of uncertainty out of migrants' lives, and it had the effect of settling migrants so that they no longer had to move, say, 8 times. But it was much less. And so wages and working conditions really improved. In fact, some harvest wages in the late 60s and 70s were almost double the California minimum wage.
But what kind of crumbled him?
What crumbled him was, at the same time that we ended the Bracero program, Congress enacted no new laws to help us enforce the border. The Border Patrol got no new resources for 5 years.
Wow.
In those 5 years, apprehensions increased from 44,000 a year in '64 to over 200,000 a year in 1969. By 1978, the figure exceeded 1 million a year, and it stayed at 1 million a year until 2008.
Wow.
Back then, it was not against the law for a farmer to hire an illegal immigrant. It was unlawful for the immigrant to be here, but it was not against the law for the farmer. And we'd catch these illegal immigrants, and we'd take them back to a farmer to get paid off. And the farmer would go, "Well, shucks, fellas, this is no skin off my teeth, is it?" And he'd have to say, "No skin off your teeth." Congress did not enact a law prohibiting the employment of illegal immigrants until 1986, over 20 years later. And by that time, the former Braceros returned, to their old jobs, and that's in my story here. But along with them, a lot more other people came too. And because the border was broken, then came drugs. And that's the situation we have today. We're trying to put the stopper back in the bottle somehow.
And it's already overflowing, right?
Already overflowing, but now not just agriculture enjoys cheap labor.
Right.
But it moved into the vacation industry, restaurants, into construction, and everybody wants to keep their cheap labor. And that is probably the single greatest thing stopping a reformation of immigration laws today, because people have got their share of the pie and they don't want to give it up.
Tell me about maybe one of the more interesting things that happened to you. It could be positive, it could be maybe a little disheartening. Maybe an individual or a family that you came across as a Border Patrol agent. Does anything stick out in your mind?
Oh, there were a lot. I mean, everyone has an individual story. Everyone. Everyone that crosses. And I've tried to capture that in this. And a lot of them are really heart-rending. And if you're a Border Patrol officer and this is what you're doing, you have to constantly remind yourself of why. In that you can't solve the world's problems, that you are just one. and that there is a law that tries to deal with that. And hopefully the law is fair, but the situation can only be dealt with if everyone is dealt with equally, and that you do not bend in that, because if you give a favor to one, you not only dishonor yourself, but you dishonor that person, and then it becomes enforceable. So you sort of have to have this ethic. You ask for an individual. I remember one time in Bakersfield, picking up a guy in the field, and he was here illegally, and taking him back to his house to get his things. We always took him back to his home to get his clothing or whatever he had, and we always got him paid off. And there was this Mexican-American woman with a child. And ordinarily, had they been married, we would have just initiated deportation proceedings, given them a letter, say you have to report to an immigration court on such and such a date, and left it at that. But it wasn't married, but it was their child. And we had to take him. And I remember that woman standing in the street, with the baby to this day. But you see, that happens all the time. It really does. And unless you, one, accept the reality that it's an imperfect world, and believe that only through law and can we cover these situations and take the broader picture, in other words. And if your dedication is to, yes, being as fair as you can be within the constraints of the law that is given to you to enforce, you go crazy.
So you're kind of giving me a hint into maybe, and this is what I really want to know. You've had all of this wealth of experience working on the Border Patrol, on the border, with people with real stories. Was that your inspiration in writing the book?
I had always wanted to write about these Mexican men who came into the United States seeking to do one thing, and that's find work and support their families. I'd always wanted to write that story. There was always a sense of stoicism, their faith, incredible. Their faith and their belief in God. That is one side of the story. The other side of the story that I wanted to write about was the Mexican-American farm workers, the domestic farm workers in the United States. And I picked the second protagonist. I have two protagonists. My first protagonist, of course, is Miguel Hernandez, who is an illegal immigrant, a former bracero who returns. But my second protagonist is a 15-year-old Mexican-American boy, the son of a Mexican-American farm worker. And I was transferred to Bakersfield in 1965. Bakersfield, that was the beginning of the grape strike, and there was Cesar Chavez, and he was part of it. On the other direction was Sunset Camp, which was a migrant labor camp that John Steinbeck made famous. And that camp was still operating. This was 1965. I don't know if it's still operating today, but migrant labor has not changed in all of those years from Steinbeck's time. But at any rate, two sociologists, a man and a wife, went into Sunset Camp, and they tried to measure the aspiration level of the children. And remember, these are families that have moved 8 times.
In a single year?
In a single year. Are making less than $3,000 a year. Most of them were, by the time they reached the end of grade school, they were 2 years behind. And it was hopeless to catch up. The most common aspiration level among the boys was to get out in the field and work beside the father. The aspiration level of the girls was to get married and be a mother. No one aspired to be a shoe clerk, a fireman, a policeman. No. They didn't know that way of life. They didn't know those occupations. And the implication was that they had no dreams, which I have never ever accepted to this day. So my second protagonist is 15-year-old Javier Romero, the son of a farm worker. And he dreams, he dreams. He even dreams of going to Paris. And so this is the life of, on the one hand, Miguel Hernandez, the Mexican illegal immigrant, and Javier Romero, the son of domestic farm workers, himself a farm worker.
So the book is beautiful, it's poignant, and it tells a really, really important story. But you make it sound sitting here like it was just so easy. Pick up a pen and write, a couple hundred pages, publish it, and voila. But it wasn't that easy for you.
If it's in here, it's real easy.
You had to go through a couple of trials and tribulations and jump a few fences yourself in order to get this thing published.
Well, the first was at age 60 and retired after 35 years in the INS, the discovery, I couldn't write fiction. I'd spent 35 years writing administrative decisions, reports of investigation, memorandums and stuff like that, where you
Full of
just
flowery language?
Whoa, absolutely the opposite.
Exactly.
I mean, the flattest verb you can possibly find. No adverbs. Never use a pronoun if you can use a proper noun. And so I went up here, I enrolled in some writing classes up here at the U of A campus, and it did not take long for me to find out that, whoa, I had some learning to do. So I spent, I've taken every writing course that the University of Alaska offers, most of them distance delivery. Some of them I've taken as many as 4 times just to get to practice.
Wow.
And people here in town have helped. I worked with a writing group, and we met every single week for 4 years, and really worked hard, and other local writers have helped a lot. But yeah, it took years to learn to write acceptable fiction. I mean, and even I remember Scott Boland, who wrote a wonderful review in last week's Scene. I got him to read a manuscript about 5 years ago now. And he made some comment very nicely about he'd read this whole thing and not found a single metaphor. Oh my God. So that was really my first working draft. And I've rewritten the story probably 4 or 5 times. And yeah, you'll find a few metaphors in there.
So when you write, everyone who's an artist has their own kind of creative process.
Right.
I've discovered. Is it that you might be going through daily life and then all of a sudden, oh, that needs to be part of the story, or are you more methodical? I think I know the answer to this, but I need to ask the question.
All right. My writing habits. I get up every morning, I have breakfast, and I go right to my sunroom and I sit there and I write for 3 hours. Started at 3 hours because that was how long the battery lasted on my laptop. But that's the first thing I did every day before I even got dressed. You'd always do those 3 or 4 hours every day, including
Did you ever just sit there for part of those 3 hours and say, gosh, I don't know what to write? Or did you just kind of let loose?
Never. Because when I went to bed at night, I'd lay there and I'd think about my characters. And I think, well, now, what would Javier do? Or how is he going to handle this? you know, and I come up with the situations. And I tried, you know, the backstory in this is the evolution of our border policy in the last 50 years. So I tried to make the scenes true to that, not only the setting, but the story, you know, reflect that. And I'd put my character, whether it be Miguel or Javier or Janice or one of the others, in a situation. And then I'd say, you know, I'd lay there at night and think, you know, what would Javier do or what would Janice do, you know? And, you know, by morning, I'd have the answer. I'd go to sleep on it. You know, by morning, I'd have the answer.
So you're just taking
And
away.
I'd sit there and just write like crazy. Here in town, it's been great. I mean, the reception I've got here in town is, wow. You know, there's not a day that goes past that someone doesn't call, or I run into someone in Safeway and they want to talk about my book. And I just can't tell you how, you know, my head is about like that.
No, you're not like that. Say, but you know, talk about the local aspect here. The people that walk up to you on the street or in Safeway or anywhere else and ask questions about the book. What was the most unusual question that anyone's asked you?
I'm not sure about the most unusual. The most common thing is that it's made them think. It's described a world to them that most people view only in the abstract, or if at all. You know, they read a newspaper headline or they see a headline on TV or stuff like that. But there's still, you know, this problem of these millions of people and the whole issue of how do we choose and bring people to our country. It's very esoteric.
And it's oftentimes so uncomfortable that people don't want to think about it.
You're absolutely right. There are so many inconvenient truths in the whole thing. And that's, I think, a big reason why people, another reason why immigration reform is not moving, is because the people who should be involved, like you and I and everyone else and the voters, you know. And
So taboo. I don't want to think about it. Does it really
exist? You don't want to
exist?
think about this too much because you might run into something that you might not like. It might be a difficult choice to make. And there are difficult choices to make. And I've left it to readers, you know, to decide who's the protagonist and who's the antagonist in this, you know. Is it Miguel or is it Javier, you know?
So they have to read it and find out.
Right, because as a country, we're going to have to make those decisions, and not everyone is going to make the same decision. And that's fair too.
You know, I think there's a lot of folks, or a few at least, who would aspire, you know, I want to write a book, or I write and maybe it will be a book. How does it actually become a book? I mean, there's a lot of people that write a lot of stuff, but it never comes out with this beautiful, you know, product. That what this is on Amazon right now?
It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's also in Parnassus, and
here
Jerry's Books
locally,
at the
right?
Plaza.
And I mean, it's
and
very
the Point.
reasonably
Yeah.
priced too.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, how did you get to this finished product? You spent 3 hours a day, every day, taking all of these classes.
Actually, I spent a lot more because I also did a lot of research.
Okay.
And actually made 3 trips back down the Imperial Valley to
Oh, wow.
be sure of my memory. But
But I mean, do you have an agent? Did you have an editor? How did that all work?
no, publishing is really different today. Publisher won't talk to you. You'll only, you know, you have to have an agent. Publishers just won't talk individually to an author, particularly a new author. Maybe, you know, a well-practiced one. But so you got to find an agent. An agent is looking for a person to represent, and he wants that person to have 7 or 8 books, you know.
In the pipeline.
You know, well, you look at me, and do I look like someone who's going to produce 8 more books? So the bottom line is, you know, I've done this all myself, but I've had a lot of guidance. I found a woman down in Bothell who sort of, she organizes all this stuff. And through her, she set me up with an editor,
Oh, okay.
and who did a wonderful job. And but before that, I have to say that Layla Carey here in Ketchikan edited my manuscript, did the final edit on my manuscript.
Oh, so cool.
And she was, Layla, I asked her for two reasons. One, I liked her stories in the Daily News because what she wrote in the Daily News always was a story.
Exactly.
It had this, you know, so, and the other thing is she is a voracious reader.
That's true.
And so I picked Layla, and I was very glad I did. And she came up with a title, Jumping the Line.
Really?
Right.
Huh.
But of course, then this woman I found in Bothell, you know, she insisted I have this editor too. And of course, the editor I got down in Bothell did another thing. Layla uses the AP style book. Well, you know, for this to be a success, according to this woman, I had to have it edited by someone who was steeped in the Chicago manual of style.
Really?
Oh, yes. And so, yeah, there's a lot different I found, particularly in capitalization and in punctuation. Chicago manual style is designed for novels and make them readable.
Right, right.
So it cuts back a lot on capitalization and things that I would ordinarily capitalize a proper noun, like Border Patrol, capital B, capital P. Oh no. So all that had to go. And then of course there's a lot of Spanish in here. And I wanted to be absolutely certain that the Spanish was correct.
Oh, I can imagine, right.
So she hired a Spanish editor for me.
Oh, neat.
And then there are all these other things. Of course, Dave Rubin did the artwork for the cover, but then the cover has to be designed. And you have to watch such things like the color of the backing here, you know, so that when put on a bookshelf on a bookstore, that this will jump out to you as opposed to other books.
And that never would have crossed my mind.
Mine either.
So Dave, the one thing I've got to know is a book cover.
Yeah.
Famous artist. You're really branching out. Have you done other book covers?
Well,
Because this is this is really cool.
Oh, thank you. Of course, it's an independent, you know, which currently is, you know, a real viable way of publishing a book. But I illustrated a children's book for Alaska Northwest Books, year 1998, and so one of the paintings was the cover. So I never really designed a cover. Had an idea, and I initially Luis was at the top of this picture. Maybe they.
Yeah, right here.
It was an older man. It was Miguel in the story. But the book company, as far as them taking part in this design, they said, no, we should have a younger man up there. Maybe Miguel as a young man instead of as an older man.
Interesting.
So, okay, we can get Luis to pose, the owner of Ocean View Restaurant. And so then they also sent me a picture with the kind of that they had with a color scheme with the sky like this and the reddish sunset. And then they had, I had sent them an idea initially of my own with having, because I read the story, I read the manuscript, and I chose the scene where they're actually jumping the line. I thought that would be most appropriate to go with the title, which would appear on the cover. So I started with that, and they sent back their idea, and I had this lighter color scheme for the sky, and still had people silhouetted, but I wanted it arranged. I was thinking of a 1950s movie poster, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I wanted that action, you know, maybe even earlier, 30s, 40s. So an action scene, and so I had them placed, you know, right next to the fence. They're just about to cross it. We had Gabby, who is Luis. Well, first we had Luis up here, who is the first person to come. He's the pioneer of the family. And so he posed here outside with the shovel, and we got an actual hat.
Now, did you take a photo of him when he posed, or did you do
Yeah,
a quick sketch?
I did. I took a photo of him, and posed him in this way with the idea that he was going to appear over the title, and that they were going to be below. So Luis's sister posed for Concha. Gabby posed for Concha.
For the character Concha.
Yes, Concha, who was the grandmother. So I had to make someone who looked much older than Gabby actually does. She could not play the grandmother in this story. But she posed, and this was her figure.
Hello, my name is Gabriela Horta, and I am Luis's sister from Ocean View Restaurant. And I really, really want to share this story about, I have a part of this book. Mr. Mike, I'm working here in the restaurant with my brother, and almost 6 to 8 months ago, I was in the counter at the front talking with my brother, and Mr. Mike came inside the restaurant and asked Luis if his wife and his daughter can pose for the cover of the book. And Luis said, oh, you know what, I'm sorry, but my wife, my family now is in Mexico, and I was just on my brother's side. And he just turned the head and said, oh, but my sister can do it. And I said, well, yes, I can do it for you. But I know my brother is like, oh, it's easy to say yes, but and at that time, at that moment, I said, okay, I can do it. What do you need? And Mr. Mike asked me, okay, you have a daughter? Yes. And I need a youngest woman. And you and little girl, one little girl. Oh, okay, I have a niece called Karina. It's my husband's niece and my niece. And I say, yes, we can do it for you. But okay, I finished my work day, I went at home, and I start thinking, okay, I say yes, but what is about this book? And I called Luis, and Luis said, oh, it is something about immigration. Oh, and I just said, okay, but like everything in our lives, or everything around the world has two faces, right? Two faces. Yes, and immigration is one of the things, it is very touchable to me because I am from Mexico. And obviously, I really want to know what Mr. Mike wants to talk about in that book. And I call my brother and I say, you know what? I say, yes, but I have a couple questions and I want to talk with Mr. Mike. And Luis said, ay, Gabriela, why you don't believe in me? No, because you like to make a lot of jokes. I really want to talk with Mr. Mike. Ask him if he can come to talk to me. And Luis called me back and he said, yes, you need to come on Saturday. Okay. I came and Mr. Mike was here and I asked, I really have a couple questions. I say yes, and if I can help you, I will. But I really want to know first what the book are talking about and what way are you going to tell stories in this book about immigration. And he say, no worries, Gabby, no worries. I work in a border patrol for many years, and I really want to share stories that in a good way. And I feel peace in my soul, like when he said that, because I really, really respect all my people, everything they did to came to this country, to continue a dream, or to make the best for their kids. Not for us, because we came to work really hard to do and to make a better life for our kids. And I told Mr. Mike, and he put that part in the book, and I feel so proud of that. And he said this, I promise, Gabby, I'm going to tell good stories about your people. And I say back, you better do it. You better do it, please. And even was the second time I met Mr. Mike, I feel that connection of compassion and good heart for the people who suffer so hard. And I know I really respect all the ideas and faces about immigration before, even if I not believe it, on many ideas. It's all around now in this country and all around the world for the people who needs go to jump the line to another countries. About hopes and dreams, I feel this. Luis's first is a continuation for my grandma's dreams. Why? Because she was the one in the family who came to work to this country. She left behind 3 girls and 1 baby boy, 40 days born. Yes, and we was very close to my grandma. She passed away 2 months ago, and I really love my grandma and respect what she did. Not just for her and their kids, even for my kids, because we are a continuation for her dream. She told me in many occasions, many times, short stories about her life. And I really remember that day she was telling me about when she was deciding to come to work to this country. And she told me, one day one of my cousins came to visit to me from California. At that time, I was having a baby boy born. He was 20 days born, and 3 other girls, my mother and two more girls. And the cousins tell to my grandma, you know, you better need to go with me, because it's not any way you can survive just you with 4 children. And my grandma tell me, at the time when I heard that words, I say no. But I know, I definitely know I want a better life for my daughters. And it was the only way I had to make my dreams come true. And he was there in Guadalajara, Mexico for 30 days. And one day before he was leaving, he went back to visit to me and tell me the same. And I realized this is the only opportunity to have to give a better life for my kids. And I decide, okay, I'm going. And my mother's at that age was 15 years old, around 14. And she was in charge of the other 2 girls and the baby boy that was 40 days born. And she came to work here, first in the fields. Later, the cousins found a job in a house. And she always was very thankful with the family, American family. She was the nanny and the housekeeper and everything in that house, cooking for almost 5 years, continually. She never come back to Mexico to see the baby boy or the daughters. And she back almost when was past 6 years working hard here. She was telling me one time, you know what, Gabriela? For many years, even all the money I was getting, I never buy even a lollipop, never. All the family gave me food and shelter, very good family, only to follow my dreams, have a own house for my kids, and give education.
Her daughter, Angela, who was playing the role of Rosalinda in this story, poses here, and she's holding the make-believe baby Carlos. There wasn't a baby here. Rosalinda didn't actually have a real baby. I mean, Angela wasn't really holding a real baby.
Characters versus real people, right?
But this is her actual daughter right here, Caterina, who's playing Maria Elena in this story. And here they are posed on this little bluff. They're right before jumping the line, you know, and that's.
So let me ask you a question. You read the manuscript, and you've been kind of going back and forth with Mike for how long on this kind of idea?
Well, he first asked me, I think 3 years ago, if I wanted to do this. And I thought it sounded like a great idea. So I said, well, I want to read it first, so I did. I was actually in New York when he emailed me at my mother's house, and. That was 3 years ago. And then I came back and read the manuscript. And I just have to say, just my own experience of reading the manuscript was at first, you know, Mike is laying out the characters, and all of a sudden, you know, you become invested in all the characters. And all of a sudden, we're at one point in the story, like, you know, 2/3 of the way through, And I'm like this, like, oh my God, no. I'm so, and so it made it easy, obvious to pick the moment about, right about to go across the border. And what was great was we were here once meeting with Luis, the day we were gonna pose. And he was looking down at, the idea. I had already done a picture of the older man, and the hat that they were wearing, the authentic hat, and the shirt. And it was Mike's idea to have the shovel across the shoulder, I think. But Luis was looking down at the initial ideas for it, and he goes, yeah, that's what they looked like when they came,
Really?
And that really hit me, like when they came. I was seeing it as, descended from Europeans coming through.
Now, who is he referring to?
Well, his
Anyone,
family,
yeah.
but how the Mexican people came. And I was thinking about my own experience in my family with Ellis Island, and this was this whole other part of the country, and he was looking at it and remembering and thinking of his, ancestors and how they came. So it was kind of a cool moment, and it explains here right away the situation where the people have been coming every year to do the farm work at a certain time of year. They expected to go to work, and the farmers were expecting them to come, and all of a sudden there was this law like, no, you can't do it anymore. So, and I didn't know that, and it was very meaningful. The whole experience for me, learning about, how they came, and sitting in a restaurant, it's owned by someone descended from these people.
So
it was a great moment.
we've talked with you a lot about various art pieces that you've done around Ketchikan,
Yeah.
and some of your visions for maybe some art pieces that you would like to do. So you've read the manuscript. Obviously, you have been very touched by it, and you're completely invested in this project. The question that's been nagging at me from what you said before, so you had this vision and you kind of laid it out in your own mind. And then all of a sudden you're working with a publisher or an editor saying, no, maybe this color up here. Was that difficult for you?
No, well, when I saw their idea, they sent back some ideas. They used a photograph of a sky and a sunset, and they just had like a row of people silhouetted against it. And to me, it looked like it was the photographer who's waiting for people as they're about to jump the line. Would you like a family picture? Their idea, like there was no drama, there was nothing. It was like.
It didn't fit the manuscript.
No, not at all. But I liked that idea, and I saw it, and I liked the idea of I had my person like right in the middle, Miguel. And they had moved it over, and I kind of liked that. I would have done a different print, but they had a little say on that too.
So it was like 4 months or so that you were working on the painting.
Yeah, I guess so.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What was you've kind of talked about one of the most important scenes in the book for you.
Oh yeah. I don't want to give that scene away.
You don't?
No,
okay.
no.
Because you want people to read it, obviously.
Yeah, well, it's like, there's two places in the book where I was in shock almost. Like the ending is just completely, it was amazing. It was amazing. I told Mike that I really like Charles Dickens and how you have all these different stories and how they're woven together. And I thought it was kind of that kind of a thing. The end was just completely shocking. I thought it was amazing, yeah.
You were telling me how you met Mike long before the book. How did that happen?
Well, I got to Ketchikan, because I was working for a guy. So I ended up in Ketchikan after being in Anchorage, Homer, Kenai, Soldana, Kodiak, all over Alaska. So I come to Ketchikan, and I want to become a U.S. citizen. And so he was the officer at the time. So I met him, and then he's like, "Oh, so are you ready for your test?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I went to pass the test, and my third question, I totally didn't know anything about history. And he's like, "Well, you have a place, you have a restaurant, so you need to learn the history." And I was like, "Well, so how am I going to do it?" And he's like, "I'm going to send you to high school." A 30-year-old going to high school. I'm like, "Really?" So he's like, "Yeah." So he sent me with Ortiz. That's the last name of the teacher. So I went to learn the history of the U.S. And then after I learned that, I wait I think it was like 6 months waiting after I learned, so I went to him again, and then I passed the test. So he's been a very good person in a very good way for me, you know. Not only for that, he's a great person, and he helped me in a way that I never thought someone was gonna help me out. So that was really good. Dave, when I heard he was gonna do the cover, and I said, yeah, should I do it, but I was thinking how it's gonna happen, and he wanted a special hat, because back in the days, the people who was working in the field, the hats were different than nowadays. So in that time, my wife was in Mexico, and I have her to go with her dad, because her dad is from a small village, to buy the hat. So the hat that is in the book is the original hat they used to wear back in the days, So that's how the hat came along, and then the shovel, right? So it was really, actually I looked the cover, and I like it. I believe that nothing is easy, and second is where you want to be in the long run. Honestly, I'm gonna be honest with you. I got to the US when I was 15. I didn't know what I want. The only thing that I want is come and work. And there is one thing that I will never forget. The first day that I came to the US, that was the last day that my mom ever worked. 30 years. So all the money, and always when I work, we always send the money to Mexico. And all this happens thanks to, not to me, this happened to the local business, the local people, the people that work here, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's not like you own a place, but there is somebody behind you, the employees, the servers, everything. So there is a lot of things anyone can make happen if you want it to happen. I mean, it's not like you're not gonna sit in the chair and thinking, hey, I want this, but it's not gonna happen. You just gotta move forward. You're gonna be loyal to your dream, So and things start happening to you, like I'm saying, when I came to the US, I never thought I owned something. I just want to work. That's it. All this just happened because maybe that was the way it should happen, So, no, it's you, and you got to push forward. I mean, nothing has been easy, trust me. There is so many things that I was talking to Mike a long time ago, and I will never forget either. When I came to the US, 15, I didn't know anyone. For 2 weeks, I promise, I sleep in the streets for 2 weeks. And just the only good thing that I know, 7-Eleven, coffee and donuts. That's it. Because that's what I ate, And I was back and forth in LA, downtown LA. I mean, I wasn't even scared. Number 2, I swear that if I reborn again, I will do the same thing. I won't change nothing, And it's been hard, but we do our best for our kids, Maybe our kids get tired of listening, when I was your age, I this and that. School. I went to school until 2nd grade. That's it. Second, third, learn how to read and write and move on. But there's maybe people like us or like me, there's a lot of them, just nobody knows the stories, but there is, besides behind a business or behind a good person, there is something to tell, And like Mike, he decided to describe one of many things that happen in life in a book. And honestly, it was very fun making the book. I didn't make the book. I just told him a few things, but everything was processing in his mind. And maybe for years he wanted to do it. And, it's kind of nice to have a complete life in a book. The way he's playing it, that's the way it is,
So, I want to have you read just a short a short little excerpt, maybe one that you really like, that might give someone at home watching this that kind of aha moment.
Well, how about we start with Miguel? Ready? Mexicali, Baja California, Mexico, January 1965. Miguel Hernandez Ochoa gazed across the wind-blown street at the border fence. Lit by a lone incandescent bulb, the barrier rose from a concrete footing and towered above the hedge of twisted brambles. It was more than twice his height. The interlinked heavy-gauge wire formed small diamonds, wide enough to admit the toe of a pointed shoe or 2 fingers of a desperate hand. But on top of the panels, held open in a V by metal brackets at the top of each post, 6 strands of barbed wire were stretched taut. Imagining himself at that height, trying to wriggle over the sharpened barbs, Miguel's muscles tightened and his heart pounded. Sudden dizziness made him take a half step backward. He was forced to look away. Edging back into the shadows at the side of a building, Miguel shoved his bare hands under his armpits. The night was cold, and his thin coat had no pockets. For 2 days and nights, he had trundled across the deserts of northern Mexico in open freight cars. He had eaten little and was tired. Fighting despair, his thoughts shifted to his wife, Concha, who remained behind in their small adobe and thatch house in Zacatecas. Concha would understand his fear, he thought, but she would count on him to get across the fence. I've got to find a way, he told himself. I can't let my children go hungry.
That was amazing. That was amazing. So tell me again, I can purchase this book locally here at Parnassus, of course.
Or at Jerry's Books and Games Plaza.
Shop locally.
Or at The Point.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, thank
I really
you.
appreciate it. This is amazing, and congratulations. What a feat. What a life you've had, too. So thank you very much.
Very well.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share these stories with you. And I always remember my grandma say this: you need to work so hard and be very respectful with the Americans because they are good people. And we are feeling so blessed raising our kids in this community and working for this community. It is very lovely, all the people who know us and who knows my kids and Luis's kids. And we are here. We are a continuation for a dream, for my grandma's dream.